Hey filmmakers! Today we're going to look at a vintage lens that creates the most beautiful bokeh I've ever seen, and it is super affordable at only about $50. Now this lens is a Russian Soviet lens, and it was manufactured from about 1958 until 1992. The version that we're going to look at is the Helios 44M-4. Now they did make an earlier version of this, which was the 44-2, but they're almost identical and they're going to pretty much give you the exact same image. But first, I want to show you the kind of footage that you can get while using this lens.
Good morning, angels.
As you can see from that footage, you can get some absolutely beautiful and stunning images. Now let's talk about the technical stuff. So this is a 58mm lens on a full frame sensor. But if you're using a crop sensor like an APS-C, it is the equivalent of an 87mm. So it actually does crop in quite a bit and takes out a lot of that beautiful blurry swirled bokeh that you get on a full frame sensor. So I think for best results, you do want to use this primarily on a full frame camera. I'm actually shooting this right now on the Sony A6500 using the Helios lens, and so it's actually cropped in, and you can actually see some of the swirly bokeh right here in the lower corner where it's starting to become ellipsoidal. So let's talk about that. That beautiful bokeh that everyone talks about, it's very round actually in the center. But as you start to get to the outer edges of the frame, you can see that the bokeh becomes ellipsoidal. And a lot of people also call this the cat eye effect. This lens is the sharpest at the center. So anytime I'm using this lens, I always make sure to put my subject dead center or near the center of the frame, because there is a lot of softness around the edges. But I rather like that because it draws your eye right to the subject. It's not the sharpest in the world all the way from edge to edge, but it is a very sharp lens, even at f2, which I always recommend shooting at f2 wide open on this lens because it's going to give you the best results and the most beautiful bokeh. This lens is the M42 screw mount lens, so you're gonna have to use an adapter to put it on a modern day DSLR or mirrorless camera. So I'm actually adapting mine to go Canon mount. And then from Canon mount, I'm putting it on my variable ND adapter that goes to Sony E mount. That way I can take advantage of my ND filter and still shoot wide open at f2 and get the proper exposure. As far as build quality goes, these things are tanks. It's a full metal build and of course glass. And it also has a very smooth focus ring. Now the only con with it is that it has a very long focus throw. So if you're trying to do a lot of rack focusing from something near to something far or at infinity, you have to turn that focus ring a lot. Now this is a fully manual lens, so you're not going to get any autofocus or optical stabilization. And the aperture is also controlled by a ring, which unfortunately is clicked. But I don't think it's a huge problem because I'm always full open at f2 and I'm not really changing the f-stop anyway. Another thing to note about this lens is it does flare pretty easily, but I didn't really have any issues with that when I was shooting out in bright daylight. The only time was when I was actually shooting directly into a light source like the sun. But I didn't see it as much of a problem because the lens flare is pretty unique and very beautiful in its quality. But if you don't want those, you can use a matte box or use like one of those screw-on lens hoods. Now this vintage lens, like I said earlier, is a 58mm, but I think it could easily replace the 50mm lens in your kits, or if you don't already have one, it's a great option because it's so affordable. You can find them on eBay used for around $50. I think this lens performs best in sunlight, especially when there's a lot of green and foliage, because all those leaves and everything really brings that bokeh to life and makes it super apparent. When you're shooting something bland like just a wall or buildings in a street and such, you're not really getting that swirly bokeh effect very much. It's the most apparent especially when light is shooting through things. I highly recommend picking one of these vintage lenses up because you can get some beautiful, unique images with it, and it's such a great price. And if you want to learn how to light and shoot better videos, hit subscribe right now. I have a ton more videos coming out on shooting, editing, everything like that. All right, I'll see you in the next video.